My name is Cora and welcome to Craftopia, where we are creating a safe space for artists and crafters of all ages and experience levels to learn, create, explore, and grow. I'd like to invite you to check out our website at www.crafttopiawa.com, where you can learn more about our organization and vision and see a list of upcoming classes. You can also follow us on social media at CrafttopiaWA. Now, pull up a chair, get comfortable, and let's get crafty.
Hey guys, today we're making this fun little scrap fabric coaster. So this technique is called a toothbrush rug, and it's called that because traditionally it was actually made using a toothbrush. So when this was made, they would take an old toothbrush, remove all of the bristles, file down the end to a point, and then put a hole in the handle, and that's actually what they would use to create this rug. Today we're actually going to use this really large-eyed yarn needle because it works just fine. They do make special toothbrush rug needles nowadays as well, but anything works, and you actually can do it with just your fingers too. So let me move this out of the way, and we're going to get started. If you're using a craft kit from Craftopia, then you already have everything you need. It's pretty simple. You just need a few strips of fabric. So these strips are about 1 inch wide, and each one has a hole cut on both sides. And that's going to be really important. Oh, this one's actually missing its hole. Let's fix that really quick. Boop. Now it has a hole cut on both sides. That's going to be very important for as we're joining our fabric. You're probably only going to use 3 of the 4 pieces of fabric that you have. So feel free to do whatever you'd like with that other fabric. Now this fabric is made in a fun way. It's prepared in a fun way. I remember doing this when I was a kid growing up. My mom loved to make these out of fabric. You can use old sheets, just about anything you've got lying around. But to make the strips, you actually would just put a little snip in the top and then tear it to shreds. Very satisfying. Fun way to do. It did get a little exhausting after a while, but that's how all these little strips of fabric are made. The downside to that is you do end up with a lot of these little stringies off the side, so you will want to go through and pull off as many of those as you can. It's not necessary to get them all, but you don't want too many of them, otherwise your stuff is just going to get tangled together. So I'm just going to kind of go through here, find the big ones that are easy to grab, and kind of pull them off while I can here. Oh, there's a few more there. The white fabric definitely seems a little more stringy than the blue and gray. Just a different kind of fabric. But clean that up too. All right, so we're gonna have 1 strip of fabric inside that's going to be what we work around. So you can choose if you want the white on the inside and the blue on the outside. You're not going to see the inside color all that much. It will poke through occasionally on your stitches, but it's going to be pretty well hidden. So you'll want to choose what colors you want to use where. I'm going to go ahead and do the blue on the outside and then white on the inside. Go from there. So I'm going to take 1 strip of each. I'm going to take my inside piece, which is going to be called a runner because it's the one that's running along your whole project. And then 1 strip of my blue. First thing we need to do is join these 2 pieces. So this is where our holes come in handy. I'm going to open the hole of my white, my inside piece, and I'm going to tuck my other piece through it just a little bit, not far, just enough that its hole is all the way through. Then I'm going to take the end of that one. I'm going to thread it through, and this is going to create a nice knot between the 2 pieces. Pull it all the way tight. You don't want to pull too hard. Those little slits can tear, but you want to pull it just tight enough that it doesn't have a big fluffy tail. So that's how we're going to join. And all of the subsequent pieces that we put on will be joined that same way. Oop, I got another little stringy that wants to get involved here. Goodbye, stringy. Go into the stringy pile. Okay. From here on out, basically, we are tying knots. So I'm going to take my blue piece of fabric and I'm going to tie it knots around my white piece of fabric. The first couple of knots can be a little tricky just because they are super loosey-goosey, but once you get past those first couple, it gets a lot easier. So we're going to start by putting 4 knots on our our inside runner. So I'm going to take my fabric that I'm working with, my blue one in this case, and I'm going to flop it over my runner, then bring it up under my runner and pull it through. The first one is always the trickiest because if you pull too far, it'll go funky places. So I like to stick my finger in between the two and kind of just create a little bit of space and then pull it tight, but not too tight because we're going to have to work through that hole later. But this makes sure that our hole stays there. All right, same thing again. We're going to cross it over almost like we're making a number 4. Bring it underneath our runner and back up through and then pull it tight. I'm going to use my finger again to make sure I don't pull too tight because I like to pull things tight. And 2 more times. Make that number 4. Bring it up through. Pull it tight. Oops, up to my finger. Not you, runner, you stay down. And then last one, bring it over, make our number 4 underneath our runner and up and pull it tight. There we go. So now we've got 4 knots up here and we should see we have 4 loops. So there's 1 loop, 2 loop, 3 loop. Oh, and my loop there got a little hidden. I must have pulled too tight. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now we got them all. So we're going to go back through now and tie into these loops. So to do that, we're actually going to take this piece and we're going to curl it back around to the front, back up a little bit. First thing we're going to do is thread our needle because that will be much easier. So nice big eye of the needle, just take that corner of that fabric, stick it through. Good to go there. All right, now back to where we were. We're going to take it, we're going to loop it around, and then we're going to start going back into these holes. And we're going to continue tying knots just like we did, but this time we're going to tie 2 knots in every single hole. If you only do 1 instead of your coaster going out and being nice and flat, you'll end up going up and having more of a jar, which would be really weird. So we want to make sure that our runner is also staying in the middle because it's going to guide us around. So I'm going to kind of flop it up to the top right now. And I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to make sure I'm going under my runner, up through that first hole, pull it through almost all the way, but not entirely. So the first couple, there's a lot of fabric. Pull it almost all the way through and then back through my hole that I just made. Now I'm going to do that again. So I'm going up through that first hole, making sure that I'm catching my runner as well, because we want to make sure we're tying it all together as well. Leaving just a little bit of a loop and then go back through that loop. So there's 2 of them in that first stitch. Now I'm going to go to the next one. Here's my next hole. So making sure that my runner is attached with that as well. Going up through my hole, pulling my fabric almost all the way through, and then back down through the big loop I just made. And pulling it tight, but not too tight. And do it again, same hole, up through that one. Pulling it almost all the way through, and back down. All right, on to our 3rd loop. Here's our 3rd one. I still have my runner there. We're gonna go up through that, and then through the loop we just made before we pull it all the way tight. And again. And then last one, 4th hole. There it is. Up through our 4th hole. Same thing, 2 knots here. And now we've completed our first round. So we're going to be starting through. Now we should have 8 loops. I'm not going to sit and count them all. We're going to guess that there are 8 loops. If you miss a loop here or there, it's really not the end of the world. That's a wonderful thing about these particular coasters. These actually were originally made as rugs, which if you have a lot of fabric or you add more fabric to, you can just keep going around and around and around until you have it as big as you want. I grew up with these rugs in my bathroom, so I'm very familiar with them. But we're going to do the same thing. We're going to go and we're going to put 2 knots in each of those holes, making sure that our runner is still running around as we go. So there's 1 and 2. Now, if you were going to make this really big and use more fabric than you're provided, eventually you're not going to want to put 2 knots into every previous knot. Otherwise, you will end up with a very wavy, lumpy rug. So this is called increasing. We're adding stitches every single time. And if you keep adding stitches every single time, you will end up with too many stitches, and it does. It starts to get really curvy and wavy. But considering how small we're making ours, it's really not too much of an issue. If you do find that you're trying to go into the next knot and you're like, you're already way too far over, you can always just put 1 instead of 2. But again, you should be fine doing 2 in each stitch with the size that this particular rug is, especially if you're not making your stitches too tight. Now, you notice, oops, actually that works out. You notice I'm coming to the end of my blue. So here we're gonna have to attach another piece, make my slit. You can choose, you have enough here probably to do both of the other pieces on. So if you wanted to do stripes, you could actually add your white onto your blue. You could add your other blue on. I'm gonna go ahead and do stripes. I don't know, I'm feeling stripey today, I guess. So same thing, find the little slit in the end of the one I'm working on. So this is my piece that's going there. I'm taking the new piece, tucking it up through that hole just enough to find its hole, and then taking its tail and poking it through. Now it does get tricky if you're gonna do white on white, because my runner is white and then my working piece is gonna get white. So it's gonna be a little harder to see. So if you're already struggling with making these knots, you might want to continue just using 1 color for your outside color. I've done a few of these, so I feel pretty confident in adding a different color. You could also just do inside 1 color and then do the other color on the very outside. It's really up to you how you want to make that coaster look. All right, so continuing to do 2 knots in each previous knot. Now, because I have this knot here, it's going to get a little sticky for the first couple until I make it to that transition point. So you might have to pull it through a little extra when you hit that knot. And here's 1 and 2. Oh, see, just like that. I'm just going to take that knot and pull it through because it didn't want to slide nicely on its own. So see, we've got a nice round pattern going. Got a bit of a bigger hole in the middle than I usually do because I made those first couple knots really loose so that they would be easy to see. But again, you're using it as a coaster, so it doesn't really hurt things to have a little bit of a bigger hole. If you didn't like that hole in the middle, we can always go through at the end and use what we've got left to tie it up tighter. All right, so I'm going to keep going around my coaster until I've used up all of this white fabric, and then I'll show you how to finish and tie it all off. Okay, so I got all the way around with my white. I have a little bit more white left, and I could join the other blue and keep going, but I actually kind of like it with the blue on the inside and the white on the outside. It gives me a very wintry vibe, and since I'm actually recording this video on the last day of December, I think I'm going to stick with that. So we're going to have to tie this all off now and weave in the ends, and then our coaster will actually be done. In order to join, you see right now I've kind of got this big funky gap here. So I'm going to take my working piece. I'm just going to loop it under that next knot. I'm not actually going to tie it there. I'm just going to loop it. I'm going to tie these 2 together. Now, if you tie a knot, you are going to have a little bit more of a lump there, but it will also make sure that your pieces are less likely to fall apart. So just 1 single knot just went right over left and pulled it through. You don't have to tie it any more than that. Again, I want a nice flat coaster so that I can actually put my coffee cup on it without it being all wibbly wobbly. So just 1 knot for me, and then I'm going to weave in my ends. This is the bane of almost any fiber artist's existence. I'm going to take this white, and essentially I'm just going to work it underneath these loops. So you'll see there's these loops that kind of come down every place, and I'm going to take it and I'm just going to tuck it through all of those and just hides in the end. Now I'm going to do a whole bunch of them at one time. Make it go a little faster here. And you don't have to go till the end of your fabric. That's fine. You can loop it through 5 or 6 loops give it a little tug, make sure it feels secure, and it's probably not going to come out anyway. So at that point, you can be like, I'm done, and cut it off, which is actually exactly what I'm going to do since I didn't want to go through anymore. So pull my yarn needle off, and I'm going to say goodbye to this little tail here. Oh, look, free cat toy. Now we're going to need to do the same thing with our working piece. Now we've already tied it in a knot, so it should be secure. I'm going to cut some of this off just because there's so much of it left since I didn't do that other piece. And I really don't want to have to pull all of that fabric through. So get rid of that. More free cat toy. And then I'm going to thread this one on my needle. And this one I'm going to weave the opposite direction of what I just did. So I went backwards the way I was working, because here's the top of my coaster. I went backwards after tying my knot with that first one. This one I'm going to keep going forwards. And it will just help it all lay flatter. So we're right here. Oh, there's a little one right there. I'm going to tuck it under just because that will make sure that there's no loose loop to get. And then tuck it under that one, and that one, and that one, and that one. And you just kind of got to wiggle and force it. Don't be afraid to poke. You're not going to do any damage with the plastic yarn needle by poking. Pull it through. Now, if you want to make sure it's really secure, if you're paranoid like me and you don't want that tail falling out, you can go back over the last loop. So not back through, that's just going to pull it out. You can go back over the last loop and through a few more. And that's just a nice double weave to make sure that baby's not going anywhere. And let's cut that tail off. Dun, 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 dun. And we have a lovely little coaster all ready to go, protecting our furniture from hot and cold beverages alike. I hope you had a good time making this. Again, you can use any kind of fabric pretty much to make it. You just pull it into little 1-inch strips. So go out there with permission. Don't be cutting up people's fabric without asking first. And have fun making yourself a whole bunch of these, or make them super big. We would love to see your projects, so feel free to post them and tag us and let us see what you created. See you later.
We hope you had a good time crafting with us today. If you have any questions regarding this project, feel free to leave a comment below or send us an email at info@crafttopiawa.com. And be sure to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss out on any future crafty goodness. Until next time!